Welcome into another episode of Betting the Pitch. I'm your host, real_G Warner, on Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon. This is the Major League Baseball edition of Betting the Pitch, and we're going through for the postseason, we're going through futures, who's going to win the World Series, trying to maybe reconnect to a 2009 wager I placed in the Washington Nationals right before the playoffs started, got through the wild card and got all the way to the title game or series and won it all. Can't promise that again, especially not with a long shot. I think it was 12-1 or so, but certainly something we're shooting to unravel while at least potentially coming up with another winning season as trying to keep our heads above water, as we've done a lot of work so far this season. Things have gone well and trying to keep that going even further. Going to go through the futures. There's not much to speak about there, just kind of regurgitate some numbers I'll see at Bet Online, and then also go through the opening day of the playoffs. A lot will change from there. I'm not really sure what the most efficient way to record podcast for that is. I might be doing it daily. Who knows? See what I have time for. Tough with Champions League starting tomorrow as well. But there's, as I get texts, of course, I should turn Do Not Disturb on. But, it's just one of those things where I feel like each game is going to really determine who's going to start. And if you lose the first game, you might have to bring someone back sooner, or it may even use a game 2 starter, game 3 starter, or something like that in this short series, because each game is so important. That 1-0 is a really big deal in these series, since it's best of 3. And you also want to maintain and try to win the first 2 games so you can save your next pitcher for the first round of the divisional series. So a lot to think about, a lot to get into. We'll do a best bet end of show. Might be a future, might be a first day spread or total. But stick with me. Thanks for coming in. If you're on YouTube or if you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, leave a 5-star review. It'd be huge to get up the search rankings. If you are not a member of my Patreon, you're not a patron yet, I highly recommend checking that out. It's the greatest spot to get all my leans plays really coming out all day, every day. I try to get my leans out the night before. And then if you download the app, Patreon app, and then also turn on notifications, you can get a buzz each time, or notification, however you set it. Each time I make a play, add a lean or a write-up of something that will kind of give you an idea of what I'm doing later in the day. As a lot of the plays I'm making are closer to the close rather than in an open type of situation. But I am doing some of those as well, so that certainly helps to pay attention the night before. Price is very reasonable, especially if you subscribe on other platforms. So check that out. Patreon.com. So that's the real_G Warner. Just got off a bachelor party locally here in Dallas, but unfortunately, I'm a little bit under the weather as we speak. All lines quoted on this podcast are courtesy of betonline.ag, my favorite place to get my bets down early. Reduced use is offered on almost every game you want to bet, right up until game time. Please follow the link found in the podcast description to fund your account and use the promo code GW50 to receive a 50% match bonus up to $1,000. So use that promo code GW, my initials 50, and you get a 50% match bonus for a first-time sign-up at BetOnline. And there's also another link in case you're already a member at BetOnline. Then you can check out sportsbetting.ag. So let's get into it. I'll start in the futures, then go to the day-by-day, then wrap it up with a best bet and get everyone out of here so you can go back to watching Daniel Jones fail on 4th down. So start with the World Series odds. Braves are the favorite, 3-1 odds, home field throughout the playoffs, and certainly in the NL, and I think in the AL as well. Best record that'll do that. Dodgers are second at plus 450. Then we go Astros 5-1, Orioles 6-1. Those are the 2 favorites that have buys in the AL. The Rays come up next at 10-1. They're hosting the Rangers, and a crazy end to the season. Might just even go through each of these playoff teams. There aren't so many. Phillies at 12-1, Rangers 12-1, Blue Jays 16-1. Then we get to 20-1 with the Brewers and the Twins. And then the lowest on the totem poles, longest way to go, are the D-backs at 33-1 and Miami Marlins at 33-1. So start with the Braves, best lineup in baseball. Some questions about their ability to pitch. Ultimately, bullpen's been good this year, but definitely some questions about the rotation. Spencer Strider's an awesome arm, but wasn't really that efficient or effective at all times during the season. He's going to get a big test. Basically, all these pitchers and pitching staffs are going to be facing some of the best lineups they've seen all year, and that's going to be a problem. I guess you could say Miami and Milwaukee probably don't have the best lineups that are out there. Toronto's certainly scuffled so far this season, but for the most part, these are the longest lineups in baseball. That's why they've won so many games, and that's going to put a ton of pressure even on the big name pitchers. They might not do so well and ultimately get an early hook, and then you really are relying on bullpens. Similar theory for me. Bullpens are really important to really finishing games out and are very important to my betting strategy. I'm not going to waver from that in this postseason tournament. There are some crazy things that happen that you wouldn't expect based on the regular season. A great example were the Phillies making such a deep run to the World Series last year after really barely making the playoffs. Some teams can get hot at the right time. The Astros are certainly probably one of those teams that had to win a bunch of games and really stole the AL West Division Championship on yesterday. And you could probably look at the Rangers, who have been really leaking oil for a long time, as someone on the potential other side of that. Going next to the Dodgers, they're plus 450, so 4.5 to 1 to win the World Series. Not many of these are even close to the longest of long shots or just long shots in general that I'd be interested in. But Dodgers, their lineup doesn't really compare to Atlanta. We saw Atlanta favored in Los Angeles for, I think, 3 out of 4 games in a 4-game series, probably a month ago or so. The Braves lineup is just so long. The Dodgers certainly have a lot of talent in it. Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman, hard to beat that. But unless JD Martinez can stay as hot as he's been throughout most of the year, at least when he's been available, certainly he seems to deteriorate when his back goes out. Then he hits the IL, then he comes back. We'll see how healthy he is, but if he's healthy and he's playing, that's a good thing for the Dodgers. Of course, Max Muncy is one of the most clutch home run hitters in the game, I think. So from where I'm currently looking with the Dodgers, they have a great front office. They've done a great job with pretty much everything they do signing wise. It's basically the Rays moved they didn't want this. The Rays are not related, but the Rays front office essentially moved to Los Angeles, got a bunch more money at their disposal. And that's a huge thing for the Dodgers and why they've been so good so far. And while they will continue to be good for a long time. Astros come up next at 5 to 1 odds. Now they're the 2 seed in the AL, but they're getting a fair amount of respect over this season. I think they were favored in Baltimore for a bunch of the games in that series, maybe a month or two ago. I guess the Blue Jays were favored at at Houston earlier in the season, but that was I think April or early May. So that was a long time ago. But I do think there's some questions, especially seeing the Astros, who don't have home field in the American League, with shorter odds to win the World Series compared to the Baltimore Orioles, the 1 seed. Shirt that I'm conveniently wearing if you're watching on YouTube, or I guess you can watch video podcasts on Spotify or Apple. But I've got a lot of questions about these Orioles. Ultimately, the injury to their closer has put their Yennier Cano, who's basically went from the best 8th inning guy to it's a different game when you're pitching in the 9th. He also hasn't really held up and kind of been around for 1 season really, and this is the tail end of that, and he hasn't really been as effective. A lot more blown saves of late. That certainly worries me, especially for a team that we that should have a good shot at winning the World Series as the 1 seed with home field advantage throughout the American League. Now, the questions, you could say the Orioles weren't expected to be that good coming into the season. Were a godsend to my bank account and bankroll this season. But it hasn't really been the same lately. They did hold off the Rays to win the division, but I don't know necessarily that was really great play by the Orioles. I feel like it was a lot going on in the Rays organization, to say the least, with off the field stuff or in the clubhouse stuff, or depending on how you call it, a lot of injuries and things of that nature, which Orioles are certainly dealing with too. But the Orioles weren't expected to do this. They really didn't build their team as much as I think a lot of people would. The Fujinami signing or trade was one good move. Ryan Webb, I think they grabbed off of waivers from the Angels as well, but those are pretty quiet areas, and they're really looking to build and really not spend a ton. They're just trying to bring up their really talented minor league system and use those young players in probably environments they've never played in before, maybe College World Series stuff, but ultimately that's a very different ball game than the Major League Baseball playoffs. So I think it's reasonable to be a little bit questioning of the Baltimore Orioles, but we'll see ultimately how that goes. The Rays, Lost their shortstop, Wander Franco, to off the field concerns. I'm not getting into because I don't think it's relevant, just that he's not playing. At 10-1 odds, look pretty good. Orioles, honestly, to me, it looked like a better version of the Rays for a lot of this season, won the division because of it, because their bullpen was so good. I don't know that we can really trust the Rays to come back to it. I feel like they've had too many injuries in their starting rotation, plus even in the bullpen as well, that I just don't think they're as strong as they have been in the past, which is saying something because usually they have so many bullpen arms they can get outs. The Phillies they're 12-1 now as we get to the kind of the bottom half of the teams that could potentially win this World Series. And 12-1 odds is pretty good for a team that went to the World Series last year. They're going to try to outslug you, home runs, not a lot of hits with runners in scoring position, but just trying to hit the ball out of the ballpark. That's their goal. I think there's a reasonable chance for that to happen. In a lot of these games, it worked out really well, especially if the pitching's good, then you only need a couple home runs. And if you have someone on base, a lot better. My biggest question is, like, the Phillies bullpen's been better, I think, than it's gotten credit for this season. Question the starting rotation a little bit, but Zach Wheeler's been great. And I guess the hard part is they have to get through a first series against Miami, but that hasn't stopped teams before. So I wouldn't throw them out, baby with the bathwater just for that one. The Texas Rangers then are up next, 12-1 odds. No pitching at all, really. Starting rotation's injured. Might get Max Scherzer back, but I would fade him. Evaldi shouldn't be faded as much as possible. Jordan Montgomery is pretty much the only guy there. He's trying to hold this whole team together, which I don't really know that I believe that he will be able to do, but he's been awesome for a year and a half now, ever since he left the stinky Bronx. And so behind him, though, unfortunately, I'm not sure what to do. Bochy doesn't really seem like a good manager anymore. They don't run at all, which is a weird thing in a league where the stolen bases are such a big deal. The Rangers lineup has been awesome, but when it doesn't hit really well, it's really hard for them to win games. And in the playoffs, when 2 runs or 3 runs are enough to win you games, that usually speaks to the better pitching and end up being the winning factor. They're going to try to outslug everybody, I guess, Philly style, but a little bit more contact in their profile. I just don't know that I believe it to happen. Next, we go to the Toronto Blue Jays, 16-1 odds. A young lineup that was supposed to be really good, never really delivered on that, but somehow found their way into the playoffs. I think a lot because the Mariners really just had a tough final 2 weeks or so of the season. Now, the Jays built a bullpen really strongly, and they're going to be really competitive in that area. I don't know if they'll score enough runs to make a deep run, but with a good lineup that could potentially get hot, has a bunch of good bats in it, if you're able to get outs in the bullpen, that's a huge, huge deal. And their starters are okay. I'm actually wearing a Kevin Gausman Orioles shirt right now, but he's one of the most difficult starting pitchers to trust, but he's rarely a big underdog. And so if he is, and it might be the case with the Jays as a lower seeded team in the playoffs, that could be a spot to back him potentially. We'll go next to the Milwaukee Brewers, 20-1 odds, probably the worst lineup besides Miami in this thing. Did win the NL Central, but and it actually was a much tougher victory than it probably was expected to be. Cincinnati and the Cubs really came out of nowhere after poor starts to the season and really to put on a lot of pressure. The Brewers bullpen's awesome. Their rotation is great. They're going to try to pitch their way to the next round of the playoffs, and I really like their chances because playoffs are so low scoring. With the spacing after the initial wildcard series, you can really load up and use your best bullpen guys, and not really have to worry about them falling apart due to fatigue reasons. That's huge. Brewers lineup, I think, is a little bit better than it is getting credit for, or I think it deserves a little more respect. Certainly there are some low lows, some low valleys, but there's some peaks of the Brewers. If they can, I think their game is essentially small ball, but then if they get someone on base trying to swing for the fences and get one of their power guys up there to hit a home run, possible, and that'll win you games, of course. Of course, the biggest question, though, is can they slug with the Dodgers and the Braves? The answer is probably not. They'll have to outpitch them to go anywhere. Twins at 20-1 odds. I don't give much of a chance. Yes, they won the AL Central, but it's like the worst division in baseball. Every year it feels. They've had terrible runs in the playoffs. I don't know if the Twins have advanced in a very long time. I don't think this is necessarily the year for that to happen, to say the least, but they're going to try to hit home runs. It's going to be harder in Minnesota where it's pretty cold, but I'm not sure how many games they're even going to play there, to be frank. It's just one of those things where I feel like the Twins are, I mean, I'd be very surprised. I shouldn't be at this point in Major League Baseball playoffs. There's wild things that happen, but I think it's gonna be really hard to see them getting through this initial series with Toronto. And even if they do that, even harder to see them going further past that. But Arizona Diamondbacks are 33-1 odds, really long odds, potentially to try to back Zach Gallen pitching really well. I guess that's the best I could do. On the road at Milwaukee, I don't think Arizona is anywhere. I mean, I guess to be frank, Milwaukee's been home underdogs or short home favorites against not a lot of great teams this year. So I feel like the market hasn't loved them as much. Maybe there's some opportunities for me to back the Milwaukee side. I'm not really a favorites player in this sport, but being that there's so few games left and that I feel like the Brewers are undervalued while Arizona could potentially be very overvalued in the series, that would make me interested in potentially backing some favorites, though it's not really, Cheetahs don't really change their spots, and I don't think I would really want to either. But that's the only way I could really think that I'll probably go in the series, unless the D-backs prices are significantly higher than I'm expecting them to be. And last but not least, the Marlins. If they can play at home, they can win games there. They're great in low scoring, really tight affairs, got a good bullpen, got great starting pitching, but they have no hitters at all. So it's hard to win games 0-0. As you'll probably hear me say in soccer betting as well. Do a Champions League podcast probably tonight on that. But that's ultimately my concern is that I just don't think Miami can hit well enough, even if their pitching is as good as it potentially could be. So I'll move over to pennant futures, look at the AL and NL, and then maybe summarize with some interest on what could potentially come up and potentially hit my card before this all kicks off on Tuesday, according to this Monday night. When I look at the American League, I'll start there as they're listed first. The Houston Astros at plus 210, then the Orioles at plus 260 to win the American League and get to the World Series. Rays at 5.5 to 1, Rangers 7 to 1, Blue Jays 7.25 to 1, or plus 725, and last but not least, the Twins plus 850. So it's interesting to me that the Rays and Rangers are both priced better despite playing each other in the first round. I guess there's reasoning for that, but pretty much the winner of that series is expected to have a much better run too. And then I might as well ask, do the Major League Baseball playoffs reseed? So there will be no reseeding. The winner of the 4-5 will advance the division series and play the 1 seed. The winner of the number 3 and 6 will take on the 2 seed. So that's pretty clear. I don't think that's intelligent, but I guess it does the trick to make it really, really valuable. If you are a 1 seed, you're locked in, but you should deserve and you should earn getting a 6 seed ultimately. But I guess that's not the case this year. So sad for the 1 seeds that really deserve to play an easier bracket, but I guess that is how it is. So we'll go from here, and I guess just looking at pulling up the AL section. So the winner of the Rangers and Rays do get the Orioles. So I guess that's part of the theory that it's going to be a lot more expensive to or more difficult to get through the favorite in the AL, which are the Houston Astros, or is the Houston Astros. And so the Jays, which, as I said earlier this year, in Houston, were favored in a bunch of games in a series early in the season. I don't know that probably would not be the case here, though, because the Jays have not really played that well, and Houston did close out the year fairly well. I think it will also be one of those things where a rested team, since Houston will be able to have their rotation in order, go with their number 1 pitcher, likely, I would think, Justin Verlander, or maybe Framber Valdez, maybe Verlander because he's a righty, and the Blue Jays are so right-handed. But he goes game 1, and then at best, we're looking for a number 3 starter from the Jays, and that'll certainly throw things out of whack, definitely. But I think from my point of view, I don't think the Orioles are going to be easy to get out of here, especially as the 1 seed. I mean, they're going to be a tough team to beat, especially with home field advantage in each of these series until they get to the World Series. And I have a lot of questions about the Rangers, which I guess means I also really question the Twins as well. So it seems like if I'm going to go, because to me, if you're playing futures, tying your money up and all that sort of stuff is really something you really only want to do if you're getting some decent odds on what you're playing. So I think that probably narrows me down to the Jays at 720 plus 725. I mean, the Rays at 5.5 to 1 looks good. I mean, it's tough because they have to get through the Rangers as well. And then we'll be at a disadvantage as all these lower ranked teams that don't have a bye in the next round. It might be that the Blue Jays are kind of my pick to click there in the American League. Now go to the NL. We have the Braves plus 130, pretty significant favorites to get to the World Series. The Dodgers plus 225. Phillies 6-1, Brewers 9-1, D-backs and Marlins 16-1 odds. So when I again pull up that bracket, so the winner of the D-backs and Brewers will get the Dodgers, and the winner of Miami and Philadelphia will get the Braves. So that's a pretty bad draw for the Braves, unfortunately. Getting the best wildcard team potentially if the Phillies get through is a really tough scenario for the Braves. Because they're going to have to face a team that knows them very well. They play a lot, maybe not 19 times like they had in past seasons, but still 13 times in Major League Baseball 2023. So those teams know each other. I mean, each bullpen will have a lot of at-bats against lineups. That's kind of scary. You want to be unseen as a starter for sure, but also as a bullpen arm. You don't really want these guys to know what they're going to do to you and kind of know where you've had success against them in the past. As for the Dodgers, I mean, I think we'll have a really tough, low-scoring series with the Brewers if that series ends up coming out, and that the Brewers are able to get through Arizona as I would expect them to, and at home they should. I guess if Arizona got through here, that'd be an ultimate boon for the Dodgers and anyone who wants to play them, potentially on the other side of the Phillies being a really tough matchup that could extend an Atlanta series and make it really hard for them to end up covering or to end up getting in a good position to get through the Dodgers. I did back the Dodgers a fair amount in that series in Chavez Ravine, mainly because they're a good team or a home dog, and that's kind of unheard of with the Dodgers. Didn't go great for me, I'll admit, but close games, and I expect that sort of thing to happen. It's a little different with the Braves having home field here, but I feel like the Dodgers have some value at plus 225. I think the Brewers might, but at 9-1 odds and having to get through Arizona, then the Dodgers, then Atlanta, that's like the longest, worst road you could do. The Phillies at 6-1 odds. I think they should get through the Marlins. Definitely will question their rotation and what they have, because you want to throw the best you've got against the Braves. And if you got to start already taxing your trying to rotation, going on short rest or trying to piggyback and things of that nature, that might shorten your stay in the playoffs, even if you do get through the Braves. I feel like the Phillies at 6-1 odds are probably ranked exactly where they should be. As better chance to win the National League if they knock off the Braves. Probably will have to go through the Braves and the Dodgers, which would be really difficult. But 6-1 odds, I guess. I mean, if you win that, if they win the NL 17% of the time, you're right about plus EV. So that's not the worst thing in the world. But I guess that's the big question is there a long shot here that's of interest to me? And I'm not really sure that I'm seeing one in the National League, because I think the Brewers, that would probably be my pick, because I know they could outpitch anybody. Problem is that they got to then likely knock out either the Braves or the Phillies, and then we'll certainly have to get through the Dodgers as well. The Blue Jays on the other side, I don't really think that there's I don't see them as threatened against the Twins. I feel like the odds at fifth best, so second to last best, penultimate to get through the American League to the World Series is a little bit disrespectful. I might be buying low in a team that's maybe not finished the year off very well though either. But that does interest me from the American League. And then if I'm going to look at the World Series odds, again, I'm the long shot type. So I don't really know where I'd want to go here. I mean, I feel like the Rays would be nice if they got through, but then they got to play the Orioles on the road with probably a diminished starting rotation, not being able to use their best guys as many times as they'd like to. That's a concern. Phillies have to go through the Braves and then potentially the Dodgers as well. As you get as you get further along in the risk curve, I feel like the Brewers at 20-1 would have to go through. The problem there is then you got to beat an AL team after going through potentially the Dodgers and the Braves in addition to your wild card series. I mean, there's not a lot of super hot teams that just like went on this huge run to get in the playoffs. It seems like a lot of teams really kind of gave the playoffs or their berths or their seeding away towards the end of the season, which can speak to a lot of these good teams that have essentially fallen off or are so tired or so banged up at this point in the year. I'm struggling to come up with something that's of interest. I think my biggest one so far on the future side is in the Blue Jays that's plus 725 number to win the American League pennant. So now I'll move to, of course, best bet coming end of show, but I'll move to the wild card best of 3 game 1 opening round on Tuesday, October 3rd, which is going to be a big day of baseball tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it as it's kind of been a little bit of a lull lately, I'll admit. But glad we're here. All these games matter. Everyone's going for it, and that should be cool. So we'll start with, I'll go in rotation order, which is not the National League first, actually, which is surprising. But we'll start with the earliest first pitch, and that's the Rangers visiting the Tampa Bay Rays. And that's Jordan Montgomery at Tyler Glasnow. Current number, or I guess I'll start where we open. Glasnow minus 150 favor at the open, plus 130, so 20-cent lines. You can do better at Bet Online. Follow the link in the description, especially if you haven't made an account at Bet Online. Highly recommend it. Juice is great, especially for Major League Baseball playoffs. Also openers, which college basketball coming up soon, will be very worth it to get on openers because they're big moves that happen, especially early in the season in that type of area. But number hasn't really done too much other than kind of, it's now down 12 cents at Bet Online, minus 146 for the Tampa Bay side, 134 on Texas. That's one of the benefits of being a Bet Online member. So check it out. Promo code is in the description below. Over under is 7.5. That's come down from 8, but juice is split both ways. Might not even been a real 8 that was out there. So not a lot of runs expected. And you'll see that, I think, in the playoffs in general. There certainly can be some high scoring games, but for the most part, the hook on these starting pitchers, if they're not performing well, will be quick. And then most of these teams have good, competent bullpens. Unfortunately, I wouldn't say that about the Texas Rangers, though. I don't really think that Bruce Bochy, a former Oracle, literally in Oracle Park, or it was probably called AT&T back then when he was winning championships, but he was great. He was probably part of why they made the 3 batter minimum for relief pitchers, because he would use a lefty for a batter and then take him out, put a righty for the next batter and a lefty for the next one. Those rules have changed. I think the game has changed, and I don't think that Bruce Bochy has really done a great job hanging out with it. I think he's done a great job, and literally his lineup was the hottest thing in baseball for a long time. Credit him, I guess, for not messing with it. But I just don't. I think if you're backing Texas here in game 1, you're hoping Montgomery pitches the way he has this season, which is very possible, almost probable against a good Tampa Bay lineup that, or more so a good team at home that's kind of struggled to hit the ball as of late. But that happens when you lose your $100 million most expensive player on the roster to off the field issues. So Glasnow has certainly not been the most consistent either. Got great arm, incredible strikeout upside, and will really strike out everybody. But the dilemma with that is the Rangers do hit the ball pretty well. They put the ball in play, and he does seem to have some bad innings at times, does Glasnow. So certainly a lineup that has Corey Seager in it can put some pressure on. Texas gets out to a lead. Biggest question for me, though, is how many outs can Jordan Montgomery cover? Because I don't really trust. Leclerc has shown it in the past, got hurt, and then really was supposed to be the closer at the start of the season. Didn't go well. Ended up taking over the job by default. Aroldis Chapman is probably 8th inning guy, or rotating depending on where the leverage lines up between those two, between him, Leclerc, and Chapman. But Will Smith not really trustworthy. He can certainly get outs, and he's a great strikeout pitcher, but hangs that curveball way too often. This happens when you're only throwing 2 pitches. I would like to be more interested in Montgomery. I feel like if anything, a first 5 play would be in order. That, I mean, doesn't always make me feel great, I got to say, but I think I don't think I'm in a position where I want to back Texas because I just don't trust their bullpen whatsoever at this point. Let's see. Next on the list, as Daniel Jones continues to play terribly, we have in rotation order, so not in order of first pitch. We'll go Miami at Philadelphia, Zardo at Zach Wheeler. Wheeler coming off an incredible 2022 postseason. I feel like we should trust that to occur again. I don't know if it actually will, but I'm going to believe it until I see something different. Lazardo on the other side is probably the most difficult pitcher to handicap. He's got some huge strikeout, shutout type of outings in him. 7 innings usually doesn't go that deep into games, but then he also can get hit pretty hard. four runs and 4 innings will probably get him a loss in this one. So he's got to keep up with Zach Wheeler. The nice part is that this open minus 170 on the home Philadelphia favorite. It is with a plus 145 coming back on Miami. So that 25-cent line is now down to 14 at BetOnline. Another reason to follow the promo code below or the link and then use the promo code. But Wheeler currently a minus 163 favorite. That's come down a little bit, but really just shortening the amount of spread or handle, I guess, from a casino's standpoint. You get 149 on Luzardo and Miami, and then over under 7.5 juice to the under, slightly, not by too much, but I could see it. Really low scoring game here. Two really good starters. The big dilemma or question though is, I mean, can you back an under in still not cold yet in Philadelphia? I can't imagine in like one of the best homer parks of all in the major leagues, plus the Phillies that are just swinging for the fences at all times, with Luzardo throwing a fastball that unfortunately fastballs get hit in this game. Doesn't really have a great slider from what I've really thought of. I think changeup was his best, but fastball changeup's really not enough to do it in this year of our Lord 2023. So I think if you're backing Miami and Luzardo here in game one, you're expecting or hoping that he'll have another great outing. He's certainly got it in him in that left arm. But my issue with taking that, I mean, at nearly 1.5 to 1, I mean, you only have to win that bet probably like 40% of the time. Let me do that math just because I don't have it off the top of my head and I don't want to look like an idiot. Yeah, 40% of the time, exactly. I should trust myself more. So, I mean, if you're winning the bet 40% of the time, you're doing great essentially. But it's worth a bet. But the problem is, even if Luzardo is good, I question that Wheeler will not be able to even outpitch him or stay with him. As you get later in the game, the home team is favored because of the last at bat rules in Major League Baseball. It's not just a home field advantage thing. It's literally in the rules. So that's a concern. So you got to fight against that too. The Philadelphia bullpen is maybe not as top heavy, or I mean, it's got some great arms there. Miami's been great all season. That's really what's kept them and got them into the playoffs. But I don't know that Phillies is much behind it. It might even be a little bit better bullpen wise. So at least when you got the big arms that they have in there. So I don't really know where Miami wins this game. I don't think they're going to out hit Philadelphia. I think it's that they got to hit Zach Wheeler, who's probably unlikely to have a poor outing, but they got to hit him hard. Or Luzardo needs to do a really good job of out pitching Wheeler. Hanging with him is certainly puts you in the ball game late, but I'm not sure that's enough for only a plus 149 underdog. Might get higher by the time this one first pitch is thrown. Would expect, especially later in the night, people potentially chasing losses from earlier in the day might be betting the favorite even higher. I don't know necessarily, like, I thought this number would be a lot bigger, so I guess that's a good indication that the market does believe Miami will be competitive here. But I think it's going to take me a while to get interested in Miami, and I think it's still going to be one of those games where it might just be even hard to do that. Next we'll go to next in rotation order. So this is 3:38, the second game of the day. Toronto at Minnesota. We got Kevin Gossman, jersey I'm wearing. It was actually, I think, given out at a Toronto Blue Jays game against the Orioles back when Gossman was still wearing orange. But Pablo Lopez from Minnesota kind of pitches to his competition. He's really good against bad teams, not very good against good teams. So that's a concern. What I'm currently looking at in terms of, so it looks like it opened Lopez a slight minus 115 favorite at home, minus 105 coming back the other way. And Gossman, again, the margin has reduced a little bit. We got Lopez still minus 113 favorite, which is, I think, maybe a little too big in my humble opinion. And then get 103 coming back, plus 103 on Gossman and the Jays. When I look at the over under, it's climbed from a very juiced 7 to the over, juice to the over, and then it's now taking on even more juice. Potentially going to see a 7.5 pop, I think, at BetOnline sometime soon, as we're getting odds right now on under 7. I mean, I've got certainly can question the Toronto performance this season. The lineup has not been very good, despite very high expectations. Maybe that was a hard thing, but they've honestly, a lot's been expected from big name players, big prospects that haven't really delivered on that just yet. I do like them getting a plus 103 though. I feel like Gossman, I'm used to betting against him because he's usually a gigantic favorite, but it's a little weird to see Minnesota favored here, especially with their struggles in the postseason in the past. Plus, they are a huge home run, like, or nothing team. Gosman can give up home runs and get hit because he's kind of a fastball, which goes up, and a splitter that drops type of guy. And if you do guess right and it's in the right spot, you can certainly hit him out of the park. But I'm kind of surprised. I mean, it almost feels like the market is doubting Gosman a little bit here because I was expecting that he could potentially be favored. So I'm a little surprised by that number. I'm not thrown off completely because it does make some sense to me that a home team in the playoffs, especially with how Toronto struggled to finish the season. But the Minnesota bullpen is one I want to be against. The Lopez has great numbers at times, but he can get hit really hard if he's not locating, and that makes me really question how Minnesota get through, even if they do have a lead. I think it needs to be a big one for their bullpen to really hold on. I think Toronto gets better late. I think Gosman could certainly outpitch Lopez, and I think should be I mean, I made him a favorite, so I'm really surprised to see him an underdog here as we speak. Next, we'll look at, and the last one on Tuesday's card, first opening day of the wildcard round of the playoffs. Best of three, don't forget that. But I'll also soon have a best bet, so I'll remind you all of that. But for the last one of the nights, Arizona at Milwaukee, Brandon Pfaadt at Corbin Burns. Again, not the last game to I guess throw the first pitch. That will be in Philadelphia. But anyway, we have Brandon Pfaadt at Corbin Burns. Opened at Burns minus 170 with plus 145 coming back on Arizona. And then the bet online current price is minus 173 with a plus 158 on Pfaadt. Over under is 7.5. That has climbed from an open of juiced both ways, minus 110, to a very juiced over right now, which is getting odds on under 7.5. So probably we'll see 8 before, barring some movement, might get to 8 before first pitch, especially a later game and the public loving to bet the over. I'd expect that to happen. So Brandon Pfaadt, big strikeout numbers in the minors. I think might have set an all-time record for strikeouts in 2022 in the minors. Hasn't really had that ability. They sent him down and brought him back up, kind of stuck with him through growing pains, which has been good. I don't know necessarily that he's going to perform here. Gets a pretty one of the worst lineups in the playoffs, which is huge for Pfaadt to potentially get some confidence. But I still don't believe he's got more than a fastball, really. Slider hasn't really been very good since he came up, hasn't been able to locate it too much. I know he's improved lately, and it's been, I think, a pitch mix change from what I last time I watched him pitch, I think, and was listening to the Diamondbacks broadcast. But Burns has not really had the great year, but when he's good, he can beat anybody, and should beat, I think, this Arizona team, which is a little bit, there was some hype coming into the season about Arizona, and I guess getting to the playoffs is probably enough to deserve that, especially finishing higher than the San Diego Padres in the NL West standings. But you could argue that that's more of a Padres thing than D-backs thing. I don't think there's enough here for me to want to back Arizona. Because honestly, even if Pfaadt pitches well, I have no faith in the Arizona bullpen whatsoever. No faith in their closer. I think Kevin Ginkel is the best arm and should be closing, but I think they are trying to manage his contract potentially and get him lower on arbitration. So I think he's probably an 8th inning guy. Might not be the worst thing to make him a high leverage pitcher, pitch anywhere from the 6th to 8th inning. But it seems like closes or the saves are going to go to Paul Sewald, who they traded for from the Mariners mid-season, and that they got fleeced. Gave up for a closer reliever, gave up some prospects, some hitters that the Mariners badly needed. Wasn't enough this season, but I think it's a good move for them, as they love trading bullpen arms at the deadline. I don't see Arizona as a realistic upset in this first round. I think, as I mentioned, the Blue Jays were a much higher potential or possibility, in my humble opinion. I think Milwaukee is a team that, if they can get through this round, I think can give some trouble to the Dodgers. So I think I'm hoping that they get through as smoothly as possible. So now we've come to the end of this podcast, Betting the Pitch MLB edition. I'm going to give you a best bet as soon as I get this camera phone setup thing, so I can put this on Instagram tomorrow. But just to summarize, if you're with me watching on YouTube, thanks for anywhere you're consuming this content. I appreciate it. But please, if you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, leave a 5-star review and I will read it. No matter if it's on baseball, soccer, or some other sport I don't even handicap or podcast about. I'll read whatever you got. I'll do even some research if you got something that you're curious about. So let me know. But thanks as always for the support. It's been huge, and I think we're making some progress. It's slow grind, but I think it's getting better. If you're not a member or you're not a patron yet, go check out patreon.com. Just the real_G Warner. It's the best place to get direct access to me. You can ask me questions throughout the day. I usually get back pretty quickly if I'm around my phone/computer. And you get my leans as I come out with them each night, plus my write-ups throughout the day, which I'm trying to do a lot more work on that. So you guys all know what I'm thinking and what potentially from a long list of leans will potentially make it into a play. So check that out, patreon.com/thereal_G Warner. There is a price to it, but I think it is one that everyone can afford. So check that out. And it's probably now it's time to give the ultimate best bets. So let's go into it. So hey, this is the real_G Warner, and this is Betting the Pitch MLB edition for the opening day of Major League Baseball playoffs in 2023. I'm gonna give out 2 best bets and make an ultimate best bet out of it. I really like the Toronto Blue Jays to win the American League as a long shot to win the pennant, plus 725. I think winning the World Series would be tough to get through the Braves or likely Dodgers, maybe Phillies coming out of the NL. But I like the Jays. I don't think they finished the season very well, but I love their first round matchup with the Twins. And so that's my best bet also for the daily day one of the playoffs is I really like Kevin Gausman, a current plus 103 underdog at Bet Online. And for my ultimate best bet on this episode, I'm going to go with those Toronto Blue Jays and Kevin Gausman, plus 103 in game 1 on Tuesday. I'm not a believer in the Twins. I don't feel like they are a good enough bullpen to hold on to a lead, even if Pablo Lopez outduels Kevin Gausman. So grab the Jays plus 103, get some odds, and let's start stacking up some playoff units and potentially close the year off on a really nice note. And then I'll do it for this episode of Betting the Pitch. I will come back with a Champions League episode, probably the same close, probably after I eat dinner in a few minutes, if I can even time that in here. But thanks for tuning in. Any questions, of course, slide in my DMs. Follow me on Twitter if you're not already, the real_G Warner. Of course, Patreon. Check that out, as I'm not going to plug it again. But hit subscribe, give me a 5-star review, tell your friends, and I will talk to you all very soon.